My mom. Mothers are people who love you even when you pull their hair. And I have two great mom stories. When I was here studying to get my PhD, and I was taking something called the theory qualifier, which I can definitively say is the second worst thing in my life after chemotherapy. And I was complaining to my mother about how hard this test was and how awful it was. And she just leaned over and she patted me on the arm and she said, "We know how you feel, honey. And remember, when your father was your age, he was fighting the Germans." After I got my PhD, my mother took great relish in introducing me as, "This is my son. He's a doctor, but not the kind who helps people." These slides are a little bit dark, but when I was in high school, I decided to paint my bedroom. I'd always wanted a submarine and an elevator. And the great thing about this... What can I say? And the great thing about this is they let me do it. And they didn't get upset about it, and it's still there. If you go to my parents' house, it's still there. And anybody who is out there who is a parent, if your kids want to paint their bedroom, as a favor to me, let them do it. Okay, it'll be okay. Don't worry about resale value on the house. Other people who help us besides our parents, our teachers, our mentors, our friends, our colleagues. God. What is there to say about Andy Van Dam? When I was a freshman at Brown, he was on leave. And all I heard about was this Andy Van Dam. He was like a mythical creature. Like a centaur, but like a really pissed off centaur. And everybody was like really sad that he was gone, but kind of more relaxed. And I found out why, because I started working for Andy. I was a teaching assistant for him as a sophomore, and I was quite an arrogant young man. And I came into some office hours, and of course it was 9 o'clock at night, and Andy was there at office hours, which is your first clue as to what kind of professor he was. And I come bounding in, and I'm going to save the world. There are all these kids waiting for help. Da-da-da-da-da-da. And afterwards, Andy literally Dutch uncle. He is Dutch, right? He Dutch uncled me, and he put his arm around my shoulders. And we went for a little walk, and he said, "Randy, it's such a shame that people perceive you as so arrogant, because it's going to limit what you're going to be able to accomplish in life." What a hell of a good way to word "you're being a jerk." Right? He doesn't say you're a jerk. He says people are perceiving you this way, and he says the downside is it's going to limit what you're going to be able to accomplish. When I got to know Andy better, the beatings became more direct. But I could tell you Andy stories for a month, but the one I will tell you is that when it came time to start thinking about what to do after graduating from Brown, it had never occurred to me in a million years to go to graduate school, just out of my imagination. It wasn't the kind of thing people from my family did. We got, say, what do you call them, jobs. So, and Andy said, "No, don't go do that. Go get a PhD, become a professor." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Because you're such a good salesman that any company who gets you is going to use you as a salesman, and you might as well be selling something worthwhile, like education." Thanks. Andy was my first boss, so to speak. I was lucky enough to have a lot of bosses. That red circle was way off. Al's over here. I don't know what the hell happened there. He's probably watching this on the webcast going, "My God, he's targeting, and he still can't aim." Right. I don't want to say much about the great bosses I've had, except that they were great. And I know a lot of people in the world have had bad bosses, and I haven't had to endure that experience, and I'm very grateful to all of the people that I ever had to report to. They've just been incredible. But it's not just our bosses. We learn from our students. I think the best head fake of all time comes from Dr. Caitlin Keller, who just finished up here and is starting at Washington University. And she looked at Alice when it was an easier way to learn to program, and she said, "Yeah, but why is that fun?" I was like, "Well, because I'm a compulsive male, like to make the little toy soldiers move around by my command, and that's fun." She was like, And she was the one who said, "No, we'll just approach it all as a storytelling activity." And she's done wonderful work showing that particularly with middle school girls, if you present it as a storytelling activity, they're perfectly willing to learn how to write computer software. So, all-time best head fake award goes to Caitlin Kelleher's dissertation. President Cohen, when I told him I was going to do this talk, he said, please tell them about having fun, because that's what I remember you for. And I said, I can do that, but it's kind of like a fish talking about the importance of water. I mean, I don't know how to not have fun, right? I'm dying and I'm having fun. And I'm going to keep having fun every day I have left, because there's no other way to play it, right? So my next piece of advice is, you just have to decide if you're a Tigger or you're an Eeyore. I think I'm clear where I stand on the great Tigger-Eeyore debate. Never lose the childlike wonder. It's just too important. It's what drives us. Help others. Denny Prophet knows more about helping other people. He's forgotten more than I'll ever know. He's taught me by example how to run a group, how to care about people. M.K. Haley, I have a theory that people who come from large families are better people because they've just had to learn how to get along. M.K. Haley comes from a family with 20 kids. Yeah, unbelievable. And she always says it's kind of fun to do the impossible. When I first got to Imagineering, she was one of the people who dressed me down. And she said, I understand you've joined the Aladdin Project. What can you do? And I said, well, I'm a tenured professor of computer science. And she said, well, that's very nice, Professor Boy, but that's not what I asked. I said, what can you do? And, you know, I mentioned sort of my working class roots. We keep what is valuable to us, what we cherish, and I've kept my Letterman's jacket all these years. I used to like wearing it in grad school, and one of my friends, Jessica Hodgins, would say, why do you wear this Letterman's jacket? And I looked around at all the non-athletic guys around me who were much smarter than me, and I said, because I can. And so she thought that was a real hoot, so one year she made for me this little Raggedy Randy doll. And, he's got a little Letterman's jacket, too. That's my all-time favorite. It's the perfect gift for the egomaniac in your life. So I've met so many wonderful people along the way. Loyalty is a two-way street. There was a young man named Dennis Cosgrove at the University of Virginia. And when he was a young man, let's just say things happened. And I found myself talking to a dean. And the dean, no, not that dean. And anyway, this dean really had it in for Dennis, and I could never figure out why, because Dennis was a fine fellow. But for some reason, this dean really had it in for him. And I ended up basically saying, no, I vouch for Dennis. And the guy says, you're not even tenured yet. And you're telling me you're going to vouch for this sophomore or junior or whatever. I think it was a junior at the time. I said, yeah, I'm going to vouch for him because I believe in him. And the dean said, and I'm going to remember this when your tenure case comes up. And I said, deal. I went back to talk to Dennis, and I said, I would really appreciate you. That would be good. But loyalty is a two-way street. I mean, that was God knows how many years ago, but that's the same Dennis Cosgrove who's carrying Alice forward. He's been with me all these years, right? And, you know, if we only had one person to send in a space probe to meet an alien species, I'm picking Dennis. Okay? You can't give a talk at Carnegie Mellon without acknowledging one very special person, and that would be Sharon Burks. I mean, I joked with her. I said, well, look, if you're retiring, it's just not worth living anymore. Sharon is so wonderful, it's beyond description. And for all of us who've been helped by her, it's just indescribable. I love this picture because it puts her together with Syl. And Syl is great because Syl gave the best piece of advice, pound for pound, that I have ever heard. And I think all young ladies should hear this. Syl said, it took me a long time, but I finally figured it out. When it comes to men that are romantically interested in you, it's really simple. Just ignore everything they say and only pay attention to what they do. It's that simple. It's that easy. And I thought back to my bachelor days, and I said, damn.